Hi, welcome to Board Gems. In this video, I'm going to be telling you about Klunker, which is a card game designed by Uwe Rosenberg and published by Hans and Glück way back in 1999. So that's only a year or two after Bohnanza. And there are some similarities with Bohnanza, which you'll see shortly. As far as I can tell, Klunker is a nickname in German for like a big ostentatious rock of a diamond that you might, if you have like a really big rock on your finger, that could be called a Klunker. It's for 3 to 5 players, and I think it works pretty well with that entire player range. Ages 10 and up, I think that's pretty fair. And it takes about 30 minutes to play. In my experience, a little bit longer, but that's partly because the rules are a little bit unintuitive. I find it a little bit hard to explain the game, but I'll try shortly. You are trying to collect sets of cards, and you can take cards from your hand and put them into your vault. And once you have a complete set of 4, then you can cash them in for money. Players can put cards that they think other players may want or that they want into their storefront. And then players can choose from whose storefront they want to buy from. With the catch being that once they get cards into their vault, once they get 4, they can cash them in, but it's diminishing returns for every different type of set they're simultaneously collecting. So if you make a set of something and that's the only thing you have in your vault, great. 4 cards becomes 4 coins, which is 4 points. But if you had 3 other sets, partial sets that you're working towards that are already in your vault, and you make a 4th complete set, then you're only getting 1 coin for that one. So you don't want to diversify, you want to focus. Let me show you how this plays. Then afterwards, I will talk to you about whether I think it's still a gem or not. To set up the game, get the player order cards and get a number of them equal to the number of players. I'm going to set it up for a 3-player game, so we're going to use cards 1, 2, and 3. Just keep them nearby. Give each player a Schaufenster, a window shop. And finally, you're going to take the deck of cards. See, it shows kind of dollar bills on the back. And the front shows a number of different types of jewelry. I believe there are 6 types. There's 14 of each of these. And then there's also the necklaces, which are special. And you'll know they're special because they're the ones that have an animal on them. The rest are people. And there's 10 of these. So you shuffle up the deck, give each player 1 card face down, which they'll put next to their shop window. By convention, what they'll do is they'll have the shop window kind of on the left. Then they'll have their bank, which is where their money goes. And then to the right of that, they're going to have their vault, which is where they keep this jewelry that they collect. So everybody gets $1. Deal 6 cards face down to each player for their starting hand. We're not going to use the rest of the cards this round, but we're going to play a number of rounds. And at the end of each round, we're going to take all the discards and shuffle them back into the deck and deal up to 6 cards to every player, so they have a hand of 6 cards again. Let's look at your hand. The goal of the game is to get money. This is money. Each player starts with 1 bill. And at the end of the game, the player with the most bills, the most cards in their stack, wins. And the game will end when the deck runs out. That is, at the start of the round, we take all the discards, shuffle them back into the deck. Players may still have cards left in their hand from the previous round. They will draw back up to 6. And if at the start of the round there aren't enough cards left in this deck to get everybody back up to 6 cards, stop the game right there. The game is over. So we'll say this is your hand of cards. Each round has a number of phases. In the first phase, you're going to be adding cards to your shop window, such that later on you or another player may choose to buy them for $1. In the second phase, players have the option of adding cards from their hand into their vault with the goal of making sets. Every set of 4 identical cards can be cashed out. Some will become money, the rest will go as discards and get shuffled back into the deck next round. In the third phase, each player has the option of buying from one of the shop windows, and those cards will also go directly into the vault. And at any point, you have 4 identical cards in your vault. You immediately cash them out for money. But there's a catch. If you have 4 identical cards, and you can stack them together like this, and these are the only cards you have in your vault, you will cash them out for their full value. All 4 become money and go into your pile. But you subtract 1 from that value for every other partial set you have. So let's say you got these 2 cards into your vault at once. They would go like this. You immediately have a set of 4 and you would cash it in. However, for every other partial set you have, you subtract 1 from that total. So there are 2, even though this is the same type, this is 2 partial sets, which means instead of getting 4 for cashing this out, you would only get 2. Flip 2 over, add them to your pile, the other 2 will be discarded. So in general, your goal is to get these cards, preferably many of the same type and few of many different types. There's one special type of card, and that's the necklace. There are 7 types. All the other types, there are 14 of each card, but for the necklace, that's the one with the animal, that's how you remember it's special, there are only 10 cards. And necklaces are special in that whenever you make a set of 4, you always get $4 for it. It doesn't matter how many other cards you have in your vault. In the first phase of a round, players are deciding what to put in their shop windows. They might be cards that they themselves want because they can buy from their own shop windows and pay themselves $1, which is free, but also potentially to make it attractive to other people. You can see what's in each player's vault, which may influence you. You want to make your shop window attractive to other players that they may buy your cards for money. Starting with the start player, and the start player is whoever has the 1 card. So the start player is going to add 1 or more cards to their shop window. If they already have cards in their shop window from the previous round that weren't bought by the other players, they have to keep those there. They may add more cards to the shop window, but they don't have to. If your shop window is empty, you have to put down at least 1 card into your shop window. But each player in turn order will put down as many cards as they want on their turn into their shop window. This is what you are offering for $1. I'd buy that for $1, the card game. Let's say other players do the same. Of course, in the first round, nobody's really obviously collecting anything. So maybe it'll look something like this to start. So that's the first phase done. Then the second phase is players may take remaining cards from their hand and add to their vault. But this is 1 card at a time. Unlike this one where you're putting down all your cards at once, in this you take turns. The start player will start by either adding a single card to their vault or passing. Then it's the next player. When it comes back around to the start player, they may add a second card to their vault. Any card, different type or not different type. But remember, you're trying to get cards kind of the same type and not have too many different types of cards, which devalue everything. But a player at any moment can pass. When their turn comes around, they can choose not to add a card from their hand and instead pass. The first player to pass will get the 1, and they will go first in the next phase, which is the buying from shop windows phase. Let's say I passed. And the next player decides they're going to add a card to their vault, and then it's your turn again. And you pass, you'll get the 2. Now this player can keep going, adding 1 card per turn, but eventually they will have to stop, and then they would get the last card. So now we start with the number 1 player. So this is the start player now. The start player may buy from any of the 3 shops for $1. They can buy their own, at which point they're paying themselves $1, so no money changes. It's always $1. No matter how many cards are in the shop window, it's always $1. Let's suppose player 1 decides they like player 2's shop window. So they give player 2 $1, and they take all the cards in the shop window. They can't pick and choose. They always take all of them and add them to their vault. And again, as soon as sets of 4 are created, immediately they get cashed in. And that's all that player does. Now we go to player 2. Now, a new rule comes in. As soon as a player's turn comes around and they don't have any cards in their own shop window, they have another option. If their shop window has cards, they must buy one set at the table. Could be their own, could be another player's. It's mandatory. But if their shop window is empty, because a player earlier in turn order bought the contents of their shop window, they may buy another player's set from their shop window, or they may pass. And here's the fun thing. If they pass, phase over. Player 2 passes. Is player's 3 turn? No, it isn't. It's not player's 3's turn because player 2 passed. The phase is over. Player 3 does not get a chance to buy anything. Player 2 passes. The phase immediately ends. Anybody later in the round, later in turn order, does not get a chance to buy anything. The phase immediately ends. And the round ends. We take all the discards, which are cards that were turned in from sets, that were discarded when you made a set and not for the full value, and take all the discards and shuffle them back into the deck, and then deal cards to every player until they have a hand of 6 cards again. So any cards they still have in their hand from the previous round, they just draw back up to 6. Then the next round begins, starting with whoever has the 1 and going clockwise from there. If they already have cards in their shop window from the previous round, they may add cards to it, but they don't have to. A player whose shop window is empty must add at least 1 card. We continue like this, round after round, until at the beginning of a round when you're dealing everybody a hand up to 6 cards, that there aren't enough cards to do it. And the game immediately ends. Count the number of cards in everybody's bank. If there's a tie, the player who has the fewest cards left in their vault and their shop window breaks the tie. I think that's about it. It's pretty simple. You're ready to play Klunker. Comparisons to Bohnanza are inevitable. It was designed in that same kind of era before Uwe Rosenberg became known for his harvest games, the big complicated harvest games, and his polyomino games. Before that, he was the master of the simple card game. And you saw that in Bohnanza, and you saw that in Mamma Mia, which is a game I'll probably cover sooner or later. And you see it in Klunker. Mamma Mia is not very similar to the other two, but Klunker is a lot like Bohnanza. It has no negotiation, and it's not about beans, but it could easily have been set in the Bohnanza ludic universe. But you can tell the DNA is still there. There's still similar DNA. It's as if you took Bohnanza and took out the negotiation and replaced it with a sort of a offer mechanism where you're just presenting an offer to the other players, hoping that the other players will pick your offer, or perhaps it's an offer that you yourself might like and it'll still be available when your turn comes around. Now, in order to make that part interesting, it does add a bit of complexity. It's not a complex game by, I would say, most standards. I find it has relatively unintuitive rules, such that if I don't play Klunker for a long time, then I have to refresh my memory as to how it works. I'll remember how to play Bohnanza for the rest of my life. Bohnanza is a very simple game, and negotiation does a lot of the heavy lifting to keep the rest of it simple. But in order to balance this game without negotiation, they had to make it more gamey, add more mechanisms to offset that. And it absolutely works. You know what? I think that maybe Klunker is almost a better fit in today's hobby environment than Bohnanza is, because Bohnanza has negotiation, and negotiation is kind of out of favor. I mean, games like Zuvadis notwithstanding, there are new negotiation games that come out, but negotiation as a mechanism in games has definitely fallen out of favor for many new releases. It's been replaced with engine building and the combos and stuff, and that stuff is way more common nowadays in newer games. So maybe this is a better fit for today's environment than Bohnanza is. But the negotiation of Bohnanza brings a lot of fun to the game, and it self-balances. If you just have players negotiate with each other, the players will self-balance. It's the same thing with an auction. If you don't have a self-balancing mechanism, then you have to add mechanisms to balance it. That's what Klunker does, and it does make the rule set a little bit clunky. If you can get past the less than intuitive rules, there's a really neat game here. And it's a game that I feel like I can get better the more I play. It's a balancing act, the game, because you have your hand of cards, which are free to use because at the end of the round, you're drawing back up to 6. So you can, use as many as you want. But which cards do you offer to other players? Which cards do you put in your vault to work toward a set? And which ones do you hang on to for the next round, hoping you'll get more? Now, if you're adding cards to your vault, it can help you because other players see what you're going for and can make offers that are attractive to you. But they can't help but poison the well a little bit. You need 2 particular types of cards, and they put in their storefront those 2 cards and 1 extra. And you have to decide if it's worth it for you. I really want those 2 cards, but if I take that card, then it's going to, devalue everything else. That does mean that the game can break down if one of the players doesn't really get it. So if one player makes an offer that is just extremely attractive to a player, like it's beautiful, they're working on 2 sets in their vault and those are the exact 2 cards they need. If a player consistently does that, offers attractive deals, and the same player benefits from them, I could see that leaving a bit of a sour taste in some players' mouths. It's self-balancing in that it requires the players to balance it, like a negotiation game, like an auction game. This is a flaw that a lot of older games have because there's the expectation, or it's considered desirable, if all the players at the table are at similar skill levels. If everybody's new, the game works. If everybody's a little bit experienced, the game works. If everybody's really experienced, the game works. But if you have a mix of really experienced and new players, it can kind of throw things off. Not a big deal. It's a game. You're having fun with each other. Who cares? And those new players will get better the more they play. I feel like the more I play Klunker, the better I get. And that's not necessarily something that I feel in Bohnanza. Bohnanza has negotiation, and Bohnanza is fun. And it's fun because of the negotiation. But I don't necessarily feel like I'm improving every time I play Bohnanza, whereas I do with Klunker. But part of that is simply because the rules are a little bit mind twisty. Like, you hear the rules and it's like, okay, I don't really understand how to win based on those rules. I have to just try it. And then you try it and you see what works and you see what doesn't, and that'll educate you for the next game. That does mean that Klunker might not make the best first impression with everyone. I do apologize for always comparing it to Bohnanza. Does Klunker stand up on its own? Sure. It's a very, very close comparison. That's very easy to make. Same designer, same concept. So the comparisons are inevitable. I think it works equally well for 3, 4, or 5 players. Maybe 3 is the worst, but it's still good. All the sets are the same except one, the necklace. There's fewer in that deck, but they always cash out for the full amount. They're not affected by other things in your vault. And it makes it interesting because there's only 10. So picture one set gets cashed in, none of those cards go into the discard pile. It's the same in Bohnanza with something like, the cocoa beans, the garden beans, those ones. The ones with very few types. That when you cash those in, they basically all become money, and none of them get reshuffled back into the deck. And in the case of Klunker, what that means is, okay, you make one set, great, now there's only 6 left in the deck. I have 2 in my vault, you have 2 in your vault, there's 2 more to come, who's going to get them? If I get them, I'm getting 4 coins, I counted right this time, and you have 2 that are stuck in your vault that will devalue every other set for the rest of the game. It's not quite as punishing as I make it sound, because At that point, it's usually late in the game anyway. But that adds a lot of tension, right? When one player and another player, they both are collecting the necklaces, and it's like, who's going to be able to complete their set? Maybe neither of them. What if they both get 3? Then they're both hosed. I think a later version of this game actually removed the special set. So this is the Hans im Glück edition. And this was released in English, you can see from Rio Grande Games. The other edition, and a later edition, was from Lookout. Of course, Lookout has published a lot of games from Uwe Rosenberg. They're very close. I've seen complaints about the presentation of this. It doesn't bother me. It's very clear. They're white cards with very simple illustrations that have a strong primary color, so it's very easy to see the sets apart. Very pleasant to look at. Not ugly at all, in my opinion, but compared to the Lookout edition, whew. If you want, have a look at photos, because it's not great. It's not a good edition, in my opinion. But that one does go up to 6 players, and it adds a rule in which, for 5 or 6 players, in which you start with more money, but you actually have to pay money every round, sort of like an income tax. So I've never played that. I'd be curious to try it. I think the game works fine, 5 players, just this way, without that extra rule. The 3 phases of a round are very different. In the first phase, you're putting all your cards that you want out into your storefront, and everybody can see that. Maybe make some comments. Ooh, I like that, right? Something like that. So there's that interaction there where you're looking at each other's storefronts. Then you're taking turns, putting 1 card at a time from your hand into your vault. That signals to other players what cards you're working toward, what sets. It can be the case where in the early round, somebody, like you have 3 cards in your vault of a particular type, somebody adds a 4th card into their offer. So they're thinking you're going to buy it, right? So you get your full set of 4. But then in the second phase, you play the 4th card from your hand. You don't need their offer anymore. But there's a push your luck aspect. If you have just the perfect cards in your hand, you may want to play them all. Play most of them into your vault, but you only play them 1 at a time. And the first player to stop putting cards in their vault will go first. It's not a huge thing going first, but you want to go earlier rather than later. If you're last in the second phase, you can just keep putting cards down in your vault, great. But it's very possible you won't even get a chance to buy other cards in other players' storefronts, because the odds increase that a player who goes before you in phase 3 ends the round. So really at the first of the round, when you're looking at the cards in your hand, you're kind of making a decision, you're making a play as to whether it's more important to buy other players' cards or to focus on getting cards into your vault from your hand. And that decision happens at the end of the first phase. So you see the offers. If you see that one offer that's perfect, then you don't want to put too many cards in your vault, because that's slow. Other players may pass before you and they may buy that set, or they may pass and you don't get a chance to get anything. So if there's an offer from the first phase that looks really good, maybe you don't put many cards from your hand into your vault because you want to get out early. That means you're going earlier in phase 3. End of first phase, you're deciding what's priority, getting cards from my hand into the vault or getting somebody's set. And how many cards you put in the vault is influenced by that. So I get a kick out of this game. If you were to present Bohnanza and Klunker at a table and say, which one do you want to play? I would choose Klunker, but that's probably because it's newer to me, and I feel like I haven't fully explored its depths, whereas Bohnanza has a ceiling. And it's still fun because you're still negotiating with other players, although that can be player dependent, right? Klunker works better if you don't like the other players. So if I'm playing with my good friends, either is fine. I like Bohnanza, and negotiation is always fun when you're, having fun with your friends. But if you're playing with people you're not sure about, like I have this theory, right? It's like, the what we call the multiplayer solitaire-like games that are so popular now, right? Where we're not really interacting. I'm doing my thing, building my engine on my board, you're doing your thing. Those games work better in an environment in which you don't know the other players, or you don't like the other players. Like, I've been blessed with a great game group, and I love playing all sorts of types of games with them. I love interacting with them. But I've heard horror stories of people who have game groups that have people who are just not great. That person's a jerk, but I don't have to interact with them. If I'm playing Bohnanza, I have to negotiate with them, and maybe that's really hard on me because they're such a jerk. I feel like those solitaire games work well in an environment like a convention, where you're playing games with strangers. Maybe some of them are not that great, but the game doesn't suffer for it. You can play the game with your worst enemy, and the game still works. You just don't have to talk to them at all. Bohnanza doesn't work for that, but for Klunker it does. So I feel like Klunker is almost a better fit for that sort of environment. I mean, it's still more fun if you can, comment on other players' offers, their storefronts, and say, oh, I like that, right? Then other people at the table, they hear that, and then maybe that influences their offer. Maybe when their turn comes around, they want to make a bigger offer. So it reminds me a bit of Oasis, which is probably at this point another obscure game. But it's one I've covered previously, which has a similar idea of players taking turns making offers and making attractive offers, hoping other players will pick their offers before others so that they will go kind of earlier in turn order, that sort of thing. When we play Oasis, we're goading each other on, right? We're like, oh, that's no good. That's a terrible offer. Come on, keep going. You can do better than that, right? If you want to play that way, Klunker absolutely works that way, and I'd argue it's probably more fun that way. But you also don't have to play that way. It's not as intuitive as some other games. But if you can get past that hurdle and internalize the rules, and everybody at the group internalizes the rules, I think this is a great pick of a card game. I really like it. It doesn't replace Bohnanza for me. If you like Bohnanza in ways other than negotiation, which is kind of a funny thing to say because negotiation is such a big part of Bohnanza. But if you like the general idea of Bohnanza, but which instead of negotiation, it was a bit more formalized. Definitely have a look at Klunker. Might be a little hard to find now. There's no new version of this as far as I know. If you want to try Klunker, you don't have to if you have Bohnanza. If you have the 7-player version of Bohnanza, that version, or I guess the 3 to 5 player version, but with expansions, what you want are extra sets, extra types of beans. So the 3 to 5 player version doesn't have enough to do Klunker, but if you have the 7-player version that has, at least in English, it's the wax beans and the coffee beans, you have enough. So if you have coffee beans, then you have the sets 24, 22, 20, that's the blue beans, 18, 16, 14. Take those bean sets, just use 14 of each type, and then something with 10, whatever the 10 is. That's soy? Anyway, that's enough. And you can play Klunker with a 7-player Bohnanza deck. And I wouldn't feel too guilty doing that. Like I said, it's not commonly available now, and it's same designer, and it feels kind of similar to Bohnanza in a lot of ways. So think of this as just a variant of Bohnanza. Give it a try. You might find it's an interesting change of pace at least. Thanks for watching. Older games like Klunker don't stop being good just because newer games come out. Also, take care.